Now, one thing with this is that you have to realize it has to be really thin. So about 0.5 millimeter and less is what you've got to deal with. So we're looking at 24 gauge on down. The material that I'm using here is 1/4 millimeter, so about 28 gauge is what I'm using. This would go much, much easier if I had annealed it, but I didn't do that. I just gave my daughter a task. I'm like, you need to cut this metal, this size, and this size. So you have two different options to choose from. In my studio, I'm gonna go for the bigger guy, just because I tend to work a little larger scale. So the little scale, while it works, is not necessarily where I'm going to be, but it would be really good if I wanted it for wire elements, but I would have more uses in my own studio. Yeah. Yes, Rio has both of these. Now, the only difference between these two is the width and the size of the rollers. The teeth that are in them, there's four different sets. They're identical. So this one just happens to have, like, the rollers themselves are a little bit larger than this one, so that means that I don't have to go around as many times to get my piece through. And then this is wider. So this is 24 millimeters wide, this is 34 millimeters wide. Okay, and then I was kind of playing around too. One of the things that I think is kind of fun is if you cut your metal like this, right? Because then what I can do is once I have this, I can then come in here and I can like pinch certain pieces together and then make it kind of curve. All right, and it's not as easy for me in here. I was just trying to play with that a little bit. And then there's a couple different pliers that you can use for this. Yeah, these are kind of cool. The little duckbill pliers, it's a parallel plier, parallel action. But right now, for this particular one, they're too wide. So I would need to alter those a little bit. I'd probably have to grind those down to get it fine enough to be able to come in and pinch. So other options, you could take flat nose pliers, or you can take chain nose pliers, and then come in and pinch. Right now, because this has not been annealed, it's a little bit harder to get into, but I could always bend this and then do a pinch. Well, maybe. There we go. So like I said, right now it's not annealed, so it's not doing it as easily. But when you anneal it, you can bend it and then you can pinch them, and that way you can go through and alter the design of it. It's going to change the shape entirely. So that was the idea on the angled ones. So what I'm going to show you guys is I'll show you how you go through each one of these. Each one acts independently, and you kind of have to play with this top knob because that's going to change the pressure on the rollers themselves. But as I work down, I'm going to have to change it. So it's not like I can set the top knob for the top one and then have it work all the way down. They all each work independently, so you have to kind of go by feel. All right, so here I've got a piece that looks like it's about 8 millimeters, 6 to 8 millimeters wide. All right, and if I go through this one I already had set. So this is not pushed together very tightly. So my design is there, but it's not super deep, okay? If I want it to be a little deeper, I just give it a little bit of a twist there. Okay, and then we can go again. Still not, there we go. And I don't know if you guys can see this or not. See if that'll show up on there. No, not really. So you'll have to come up and look at these, and you can see which one was lighter versus which one had a little deeper crimp to that. So let me play with this. So this one is just a little square that I did. I'm actually going to put it in diagonally. If I put it in the right place, there we go. Now, when I've got it, there we go, at the widest spot, it takes a little bit more pressure because now we've got more metal going through, and then it'll lighten back up once I get back to that corner. Okay, so there's that, but then I'm going to go back in the opposite direction. So I just rotated it 90 degrees. And I'm going to put it back through again. This one's going to be a little bit more effort because I'm working against what it already had. And you can see here, like, I've clamped it, but in your studio, you would want to mount that. Yeah, come up and see that, because you won't see it on the camera, I don't think. Isn't that fun? So, and then this is yeah, same type of stuff. Okay, and then depending on how deep you make it, so then this, like, you could actually tighten that up, but I don't have the right hex key to tighten it up, which I kind of like because I can pull it off. Each of the different, so look, right here.
Oh.
Yep, the teeth, some of the teeth are bigger, so you're going to get a more spaced out ripple versus, or a little wave. All right, so let's do this one. And this will give you, all right, see this? I can't get that through. So this is where I'm saying, just because you have it set for the top one, doesn't mean that it'll set for, yeah. And I'm finding that this part, like, I might want to create some kind of a handle here that it's a little bit, yes, and I think too, you know, if I had this mounted, right, it would be a lot easier, I think. I think I would prefer a little bit more torque, for sure, right?
And it wouldn't matter if you would kneel it? Would it be easier?
I think it might be a little easier. Okay, so on this one, I put it through straight, and then I put it through at a diagonal. Yeah, so they're kind of fun. You know, and then, okay, so ways that we can work with that. What would we do with this? Beautiful patina, yeah, put a patina on it. Yes, so, and this would work with gold, this will work with silver, this will work with brass, whatever, right? It'll work with all the different materials. Obviously, it's working with copper. And so, a lot of times, especially if I were to do this in copper, so let's say I want to do a bracelet. So I'm going to do this long, skinny one. And I'm going to do it with one, this guy, he doesn't like to come undone here. Just a sec. There we go. All right, so there's a little flat spot on each of these, and that's where you would take those hex screws, and then you would put it into place, and then you can tighten it. Like I said, I don't have the right hex key here, so I can't tighten that, but you get the idea. All right, so let's say I'm going to do this. All right, this is a fun little piece, okay? But this is so flimsy, there's no way that's becoming a bracelet. So what do I do with it? So now I'm going to take a wider, in this case, if I were to do this with copper, I would take a wide silver band and I would put it on and I would rivet it on. I would rivet it, but you could solder it. You could do that too. But keep in mind, like, now I've got all these little air pockets. Trying to flow my solder is going to be a lot more difficult, right? Like, you could put solder in strategic places, but I don't think you'd get it all on there. And so I would probably rivet that into place. Notice that this has a little bit of a wave to it. And I don't know if you noticed, like, when this went through, it kind of went like that. Okay, so you have to either pay attention to that or let it be what it's going to be, or you kind of hold a little bit of tension on it, or on the front as you can pull it, or on the back, yeah, and then keep it more straight, and that would allow that. What's that?
Can you correct?
At this point, probably not so much. I mean, I probably could still do a tap here, but I would want to anneal that first, because going through this, I mean, yeah, we definitely have given it some springiness, so we've definitely worked it. Right? So, yeah, so those are some of the different ways that I would do it. As you work with wider materials, it will get more difficult because, again, you're going to need more pressure. So you saw how easy it was to get that little one through there. But this one is going to, and again, if I had this mounted, then it would be a little easier. But still, you kind of see. Or just don't go as wide.
I like the sound.
I know, it's kind of fun. There we go. All right. Now, there we go. There's our bracelet right there. But I mean, look at how stiff that is. Right? So again, it's not going to be enough for a bracelet. Now, another thing that will happen, let's say I get this a little too tight. What happens then? This it will break, right? And this one broke not because it was too tight, but because it was work hardened, right? And so by bending it in opposites. So that's something too, but I use that also to my advantage because now I can create smaller components, right? And again, I can take this back in. One of the things that I think is kind of fun is again, because you have the 4 different rollers, you get different effects. So you could roll one with a thinner one, and then you could roll one with a wider one, and then change the effect that way also. So years ago, I bought a corrugating rolling mill, and it was, there we go. I could do up to 18 gauge, but if I did 18 gauge, usually I ended up with little tiny pieces because as it would go through, it would pinch them so tight, right? But it was able to do like 6 inches wide. I mean, it was a beefy mill. I found that I didn't really use it that often. This one I would use just because it's smaller, it's easy to put away, and typically when I do a corrugated piece, I'm not going to do much wider than 1 inch anyway, right? So when you first look at this, you're kind of like, yeah, but it's kind of small. But really, when you think about it, are you going to do anything really big? Again, the wider you go, the more torque you are going to need on something like this. So that's something that you're going to want to consider, right? Like I said, you've got the 4 different sizes, and you guys can come up here and play with this too and try it out and see what you think. All right, see that one? Even though it was just right for the other ones, not quite right there. Okay, and this one, I loosened it up too much, but again, that's what I kind of like, is that I can do a very subtle pattern, or we can do something that's much deeper. And it just is up to you and how you want to play with that. And then, of course, if you go in the opposite direction, it's going to require a little bit more effort just because now you've got some stuff that you have. The other thing that I like to do with this is I'll do something like this, and then I'll use it as a pattern in my rolling mill and roll print on something else. So you have a number of options. So let's say I want this pattern, but I want it on silver. Well, I cannot stick a bracelet pattern or a bracelet in here that's going to be thick enough for a bracelet, but I could take this and roll print on the one side. So that's another option that you can do too. If you do that, I would not anneal this before you roll print. Leave it. Okay. Yep. So, Yep. So let's say that this is what I have now. I would lay this on top of my silver, and then I would just roll that through the rolling mill. But I would not anneal this because if I anneal this, it's just going to flatten out, right? But then the thing that's kind of cool too is that it's going to still flatten out a little bit as you roll print with your silver, but this can still be used as a design element in another thing. Take your hole punch, cut out a disc. Now you've got something for your earrings, for a pendant, or you can have soldered elements on a bracelet. Like, there's no waste.
So if you use that as a roll print, is the imprint on the silver going to be deep or not as deep?
It won't be probably as deep as this, because as you're pressing into it, it's going to kind of flatten it out. So it probably won't be as deep. The ones that I find keep the depth the best is when I've gone through multiple directions. So if I do that square. But if I wanted to do this and have it on a bracelet, I can't roll it through this way, right? So then you have to get kind of creative and see about maybe patching a couple pieces together, and then you could make it so that it's longer and roll that through. So you'd have to get a little bit more creative when it comes to putting that element together, if that makes sense.